All right, good morning, good morning, good morning. I don't have time to find out everybody's dreamed exit to this life. You know, what would be a perfect ending for you. I think for me, one is to live very, very old. Wait a minute now, let me finish, because I don't know that you can have both of these, and die healthy. Okay. What I don't want, I need anesthesia for a hangnail. I have, some folks have a low threshold of pain. I have no threshold of pain. I start crying before it hurts. And I married Linda is the complete opposite. I remember many, many years ago, I was away on something church related, but I was in town, and I got home late at night, and Linda's mom then was living with us. And I'll never forget this. I got home late at night, and Linda was gone. I mean, it's 11:30, 12 o'clock. I thought, oh, what's happened? And so I get ready to go to bed, and just about ready to get in bed, and knock on the bedroom door. Well, that has to be Nanny, Linda's mom. So I opened the door, and I said, Nanny, what's up? She said, have you heard from Linda? And I said, where is she? And she said, she was working in the yard with an axe, and the axe glanced off the limb, and it hit her in the leg, and she drove herself to the hospital. Okay, thanks, Nanny. And so I get in the car, and then we were living in Winter Park and not far from the hospital. And so I make my way, and I get near probably a block from the hospital, and I see Linda's car. Oh, no. So I pull over and look in, the car's empty. I thought, she axed her leg, and she's still 300 yards from the emergency room. And so I made the way to the emergency room, and I got there, and she was back in one of the units. I got in there, and I said, what are you doing walking? She said, the car died. The car died, and she walked on an open wound from an axe, okay, to the hospital. Not me, man. Shoot me. Just let me die right here. You know, I have no threshold of pain whatsoever, and I'll admit it. But I really would like to live with good health, and to an older age, I'd like to die with my closest, friends and family around me. I'm reflecting whether or not I want singing around me. I'm not sure about that. I know I won't be leading it, that's for sure. And but the older I get, the more I think about, and maybe some of you do as well, how do I really want to exit this life? Okay? Because we're all going to exit unless Jesus comes to get us first. We all are going to do that. Hey, listen, let me remind you, this week I'll start Portrait of Heaven. Fascinating as we begin to look at details of the New Jerusalem and heaven. And then I'll finish this next week. And then the following week, we'll finish up chapter 22. Chapter 22, verses 6 to the end of the chapter, section called The Challenge of Heaven. But the next week, I think that's October 9th, I'm going to do a Q&A time. Mike, give me I think this is the next slide. If you've got questions about heaven that aren't answered, either I haven't answered them, or they're not answered in the question section in the back of the booklet, then what I'd like for you to do is to email Andrew Hallman. Andrew's one of pastor resident interns working with me for a year. Normally he's in the class. I think he was baptizing this morning, frankly. And email Andrew your question, and please be sure to look on the question section so as not to duplicate any of the questions. And what I'm planning to do thereafter, because some of you have joined us for the heaven study, and I don't want you to disobey God and leave after this study is over, only to discover that you don't go to heaven, you go to the other place because you left. So, What I'm thinking that I'm going to do beginning October 16th, that should be the next date for the new series, I'm going to do probably an 8-week study on one, if not the favorite chapter to me in all of Scripture, and that's Romans chapter 8. Romans chapter 8. So just want to kind of give you a heads up where things are going. That study will take us up, near Christmas, I guess you could say, and we'll give you an idea of where we would be, where I would be going. Okay. We're talking about heaven, and I think I've talked so much and studied so much about heaven the last couple of months. I had a dream. And I dreamed that I died, and I went to heaven. And when I got there, I just began to look around, and I found myself in this huge, massive warehouse. Huge. And just massive. And on the walls were lined with clocks. Just one clock after another. And as I got closer, I noticed a nameplate underneath every one of the clocks. And I saw a lot of names, that I knew. And I noticed that the hand on the clock, some were moving slowly, some rather rapidly. So I asked, what's going on here with the movement of the hands? And what I was told was, well, everyone on earth has a clock. And every time a hand moves, it represents a sin that they committed. Wow. So I looked, I saw some of yours. But I just kind of kept looking. And finally I said, I don't find David Youth's. So, you only got a couple of options there. If you don't find it, then they're keeping the clock somewhere else downstairs. So I said, what about David's? They said, oh, David Youth. Yes, we know him. Yes, we moved his clock into one of our conference rooms, and we're using it for a fan. Class dismissed. I've been terminated. Open your Bibles to Revelation 21. Revelation 21. From the beginning of this study, I've really had at least my goal for myself and for you through the teaching and the learning and the discussion. At the end, the hope that because of the increased knowledge that we have and understanding where we're going to spend eternity and a little bit of what it's like, that it would, bring us a great deal of comfort in our own personal lives, a great deal of encouragement because all of us have sent others on, as it were, into heaven, and then we'd be encouraged by what they're seeing and knowing, and then it would do something about our own hope in our own lives of the certainty of heaven. I've had, because this is entitled "Heaven Can't Wait," and we need to think about heaven, and I have every now and then somebody say, Jimmy, but is it possible that if you think so much about heaven that it's almost a form of escape from the realities of life here? And, my response to that is, well, I guess it could be that. But, for me, thinking about heaven is not so much an escape as it is giving me the energy and the understanding to make it through the difficulties of this life. Not escaping anything. Listen, all of us have got enough age on us. We've all experienced the pain of life on this earth. All of us, okay? Some more or less than others, but all of us have experienced it. And for us, it's not a form of escape. It gives us the hope and confidence of where we're going. We're not trying to run away from anything. but we're running to someone and to something. In Revelation chapter 21, we're going to begin to look at some of the details of the New Jerusalem, the center, the capital city of heaven. We looked some last week at the new heaven and the new earth, and really there's not a lot of information on that. A lot of it's conjecture, but I shared that with you some last week. But we get a lot of details about the city that writer of Hebrews says that God is the architect and the builder, and that it's the place that Jesus prepared for us. So evidently it's either finished or perhaps it gets finished during the millennial kingdom. I'm not really sure. But God is preparing or has prepared a city that will be the center of life on this merged new heaven and new earth, where everything in the universe is heaven. But this will be the focal point of heaven, and kind of the center of our operation in heaven. So in Revelation 21, verse 9, then came one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls for the 7 last plagues, and spoke to me, saying, Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And he carried me away in the Spirit to the great high mountain, and showed me, here it is, the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down. Verse 2 has already said, coming down out of heaven. I tend to believe that during the millennial kingdom, it hovers above the earth, but comes down to the earth after the great white throne of judgment, coming down out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, its radiance like a most rare jewel, like a jasper, clear as crystal. Now, you got to realize, here's John having his vision, and he's trying to grasp and understand what, at least in my view, is indescribable. How do you put words to what he saw? He'd never known anything like us but a fallen, sinful self and earth. And now he's seeing this unbelievable city, the future capital city, and he's caught up in this. And it had a great high wall, and with 12 gates, and the gates 12 angels, and on the gates the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel were inscribed. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the 12 names of the apostles of the Lamb. And the one who spoke with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city and its gates and its walls. The city lies 4 square, its length the same as its width. And he measured the city with a rod, 12,000 stadia. Its length and width and height are equal. He also measured its wall, 144 cubits by human measurement, which is also the angel's measurement. The wall was built of jasper, while the city was pure gold, like clear glass. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with every kind of precious jewel and gem. The first was jasper, then sapphire, then agate, emerald, onyx, carnelian, chrysolite, beryl, topaz, and chrysoprase. The 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls, each of the gates made of a single pearl. And the street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass. It's hard to even imagine. Let me show you. We're going to unpack this a little bit. But Mike, walk through, okay, we're going to get into the size of this city in a minute, and we'll come back to this slide in just a second, but I want you to kind of get a sense. I want you to just hover here for a minute. Here are some possibilities of what this New Jerusalem city looks like. A cube, foundations and walls, and give me another picture, Mike. I had 3, I think. Give me another picture. Here's another closer look at the possibility with the walls and the gates in the walls, 3 on each side. Here's another one. there as well. And we'll come back to these in a few minutes, but I just want to begin to kind of picture in your mind what this might look like as a cube. We're going to walk through and look at this city that has all of the makings of any city, as it were, anywhere. It's got size, it's got mass, it's got building, it's got architecture, it's got walls, it's got gates, it's got residents, it's got people, it's got water, it's got food, it's got everything that a city would have. Which leads me to believe, it's very much a literal city. But let's unpack this as we make our way. Look at verses 9 through 11. Here's some of the notes. This city shines, and it shines and radiates just like one huge, enormous diamond, and it's lighted by one person, or what emanates from that person, and that is the glory of God. The glory of God. Just get a look at the picture that's up there. It's almost from the center of the city where God, as it were, dwells, and He has come down to dwell with man. And the glory of God just radiates, providing light for and through the city. A place of unbelievable beauty and transcendence, and it really represents everything that God is in terms of His beauty, in terms of His magnificence, in terms of His majestic, and everything about God, the splendor of the city in general. Now, I want to talk a minute about its size. Go back to the graph of the size. This is a picture of the United States, and you see Canada north of us. It's not perfect, as it were, to scale, but you got to remember this thing is 1,500 miles across, 1,500 miles deep, and 1,500 miles high. Let me give you a little bit of math. Just looking at floor one, the footprint, 1,500 by 1,500. That is 2.25 million square miles. That's about that size. About 75% of the United States, and well up into 60% of Canada. That's just the footprint. And it's 1,500 miles high. Now, if we give it 12-foot floors, ceilings, which is pretty generous, 12 foot, then it could be 600,000 stories. 600,000, that's 12 feet, high each ceiling, and it would probably house at least 100 billion people. Now, how many folks have ever lived on the planet? Anybody know? Okay, 7, 8, 9 billion, maybe somewhere in that area? So, plenty of room. I figure that we get about, and I don't know how big that is, some of you might know, we probably get, as it were, our space in the big house, we probably get approximately 75 acres each. Enormous. I mean, screaming plenty of space and plenty of room. You talk about a high rise. Wow. Let's break it down a little bit more at the structure. Mike, go to the next slide. One of these shows the foundations maybe a little bit. And I'll go back to the other pictures, the actual pictures. I'll come back to that New Jerusalem in just a second. Yeah, stop there. You see the foundations and you see the gates. Just leave that there for just a minute, Mike, and we'll get to that other in just a second. Let's break this down. You've got these foundations. Look at verse 14. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations. 12. And on them were the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. Have you ever stopped to think that John was one of those? And John saw his name on one of those foundations? I mean, that had to blow John away to see his own name there in the foundations of the city. Okay? Now, the wall in verses 12 and then 17 and 18, we talked about look at verse 17. He also measured as it were, the depth of the wall, 144 cubits. That's about 216 feet thick. 200, okay, that's about 75 yards. Thick. Let me give you a little bit of context on that. From the front of this room to the glass door, to the glass windows and doors, is about 70 yards. And this is 76 yards thick. Massive, okay? The walls. I broke it down because I'm an engineer by training. That's 26,400 football fields. E2 next door, it will be 200,000 of them stacked. So if you've ever had any, I wonder if there'll be enough room for me. God, I would just love a little closet hidden in a corner somewhere. Okay. Now, there's plenty of room for everybody, okay? Mike, go to that slide that's got the New Jerusalem broken down, okay? Keep on. There you go. We've already looked at the city made of jasper or pure gold. I think it just emanates showing the glory of God. We've talked about the size of the city, which I think basically is helping us to understand that there is plenty of room for everyone. The foundations we just talked about, made of precious stone and precious gems, which are a picture of stability and permanence. And then the walls don't serve any functional purpose. Why? There's no enemy. You know, in those days, they would the gatekeepers would shut the gates and up at night. But we'll see in a minute, the gates, the walls are simply there to remind us of the protection and security. The gates, as we'll see in a minute, are never, ever, ever shut. So there's total accessibility. The wall is there to show security. And now the gates. Look at the gates. Look at verses 12 and 13. With 12 gates, and the gates with 12 angels. In other words, had an honor guard at each gate. And now the foundations were the disciples, the apostles. Whereas the gates, notice on the gates, verse 12, are the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel inscribed. 3 on each side. So you got representatives of all believers of all time, Old Testament and New Testament believers. Now, skip on down to still looking at the gates. Look down at verse 21. And the 12 gates. Now, watch this. It doesn't say like. In some cases in Revelation, you'll get it like this, like that. It says they were 12 pearls. Each of the gates made of a single pearl. Now remember, the wall is 1,500 miles high. I don't know how high the gate, and it's 75 yards thick. And then there's a gate that's never ever closed, and each gate is a single pearl. How many like to be that oyster? We can't fathom this. Beyond our even our imagination. Something this magnificent. that's accessible and available to us. Look at the end of verse 21. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls, each of the gates made of a single pearl. And notice, and the street. I find it interesting. That's singular, not plural. So there seems to be one main street. Okay? Doesn't mean that there aren't other streets and other highways, as it were, and byways, but there's one main street. And the street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass. Isn't it, to me it's paradoxical, in the world that you and I live in, okay, we worship gold and walk on God. But in the next one, we'll worship God and walk on gold. I like that. A whole lot better. And notice, Mike, go back. And the street, pure gold, I think speaks to the freedom of movement and travel that takes place. Because remember, the gates are never closed. You got to remember, this is just the centerpiece. The entire universe of new heavens and new earth allows coming and going and travel. And, I think, I don't know about inside the city as massive as it is, but outside the cities, you've got mountains and valleys and fresh waters and rivers. And who's to say, some of you are worried about the oceans and the salt water and the seas not being there. Who says that a body of fresh water can't be massive? And can't be huge, okay? But I think they won't be ocean-like in terms of size, because it's knowing that the earth is 75% water, more than anything else, it separates us. It separates us. And one of the realities of heaven is not separation and isolation, but togetherness. Togetherness and accessibility. And knowing that Jesus traveled freely, that Jesus traveled, frankly, through, as it were, closed doors, though these gates will never be closed, and the freedom of movement, I tend to think, as I've said before, we may travel up to the speed of thought, which is quick unless you have a slow mind, which some of you will be moving slower than others. Okay, but even the slow thoughters, the slow thinkers, the slow thoughters, yeah, that's good. The slow thinkers, okay, will still be moving pretty fast. The ability to travel and to move and to enjoy all that God has recreated for us, all of the things that we have seen that are beautiful, all of the sights and sounds that we enjoy. All of that, you could probably take the best day of any kind of vacation or any time with family or friends. You could take all of that, the best that you've ever had, and it will be the worst day you'll ever have in heaven. That's just how great and magnificent it's going to be. Now, look in chapter 22. Look in chapter 22. And we're going to look at these opening verses. I'll come back to the end of chapter 21 when we begin, if I have time to get into some of the things that aren't in heaven. We'll go back to the early part of chapter 21 and to the end of chapter 21. But there's some more inside the city that I want to talk about here in terms of what I call the sufficiency of the city. Just nothing else is needed. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb through the middle of the street of the city. I mean, try to envision, you've got this massive street of gold that's as pure and as see-through and as transparent as we can imagine. And then you've got God dwelling and Jesus dwelling, sitting on the throne, and through this street of gold, is it underneath it and we can see it? Is it literally through it? I don't know. Is this river of life that is this? I can't even close my eyes and get into the picture of the beauty of this. Through the middle of the street of the city. Also on either side of the river, the tree of life. Where do we first read of the tree of life? In Genesis. In Genesis. And then when Adam and Eve sinned and got banished from the garden, that tree of life shows up again. The tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruit. You get a fruit of the month. Yielding its fruit each month. The leaves of the tree were for healing of the nations. I think the idea here, because there's no more sickness, is whether it's preserving health or whether it's a reminder of health. I'm not sure. Knowing that there is no disease, because there's no sin and there's no sickness, then what would we need healing from? But it is a vivid reminder of God's great work, as it were, of healing in our lives. Okay, let me read on. No longer will there be anything accursed. No one since Adam and Eve has lived anywhere but on a cursed planet. And as time has marched on, and sin has marched on, fallenness and corruption marches on. And we've never ever known anything but our own self-curse, because of our own human nature and fallenness. And we've never known anything but living on a planet that is also cursed and is groaning and moaning for liberation and for freedom. We've never ever known personally or environmentally anything but that. So imagine, I just don't want to read past, no longer will there be anything accursed, no more curse. I'll go back to that in the no mores in just a minute. That is an amazing statement, because we've never known anything else except curse. And it's gone. It's lifted. It's lifted. But the throne of God and the Lamb of God will be in it, and His servants will worship Him. They will see His face, and His name will be on their foreheads. And night will be no more, and there will be no more. And they will need no more light of lamp or sun, for the Lord God will be their light, and they will reign forever and forever. I meant abundant food. I said last week, I think we'll be vegetarians and fruitarians, whatever, got fruit of the month. I don't know. And there for us, but we can eat what we want to eat, as it were, in terms of those items, and we can eat as much as we want to eat, and we don't have to worry about gaining weight. We don't have to worry about being on a diet. I mean, that's just good stuff, okay? And we can rest if we want to rest. We don't have to rest, but we can if we want to. As I've admitted to you before, I love sleep. I love sleep. I've shared this before. I've been on a CPAP machine for 18 years, and I think there's drugs in it. I just put that thing on, a couple of puffs, and I'm gone. Okay, I'm gone. And wake up, 7 or 8 hours later. And I love sleep. We can sleep there if we want to, but we don't have to sleep. Okay? And, going back to how the city is laid out, I think because family and friends, close relationships are so much a part of who we are in life, that I envision that these dwelling places that we each have had prepared for us, that somehow, some way, adjacent and side and near are our family and friends and the close loved ones of all of our lives, they are there with us, and there's access to one another. Now, I don't know, because God never has a dilemma. I don't know how because the world you and I live in is more than ever before, even in the Christian world, made up of blended families. Okay? Now, I know in heaven they neither give or take in marriage. But it does conjure up some interesting situations in heaven, doesn't it? Okay? How's God going to bring all of these blended families together? But you got to remember now, we're not fallen, we're not sinful, we're not divisive, we're not jealous, we're not envious, that we have no sin. So maybe in that environment, that we can bring blended families together who genuinely, obviously love and enjoy being together in eternity. I know God somehow has got to work all that out. I want to spend, okay? I know in heaven they neither give or take in marriage. But, I've invested, in my relationship with Linda, you go back to when we were growing up, about 60 years. And about 43 years of marriage, okay? And I'm not going to make all that investment here, okay, and not make her pay for it there. Okay? I said, honey, you're going to spend eternity with me. Aren't you excited? Okay. She said, I need to go pray. No, don't blame me. I do pray. But I just can't imagine not spending all of eternity and having great access to my wife, my daughter, sons, family, close friends, and just be able to just kind of, enjoy eternity together. One of the greatest things about it. Now, next week, I will get into the 4 or 5 activities of what will we do throughout eternity, okay? As I've said before, we don't ride on a cloud and play a harp. I can't think of anything more damning, boring than doing that, okay? I don't play any musical instrument, and if I did, it wouldn't be a harp. So, but God's got something for us to do throughout eternity that all of us will uniquely, as it were, enjoy. Okay? Now, I'm going to get into the absences of heaven just for a minute, get those started for probably the next 4 or 5 minutes. I want you to go back to chapter 21. Chapter 21. And let's talk just a minute about some of the things that aren't there. And let me pick up in verses 1 through 4. Most of them are in verses 3 and 4. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, we just talked about that, the new Jerusalem, coming down. I think coming down and residing on earth as the kind of the centerpiece of the new heaven and the new earth, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He lives with us. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them as their God. And notice, he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning. That's not M-O-R-N for some of you who are not mourning people. Okay? Nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. So let's talk about some things that are not there. First of all, we've talked about this before in verse 1. No more seas, no more oceans, no more, as it were, the salt effect, no more separation as a result of the oceans. I think there'll be plenty for you avid water persons that I think you'll have all the water you want or need. I do, okay? Some of you that like the saltwater fish, I think you'll be more than gratified and satisfied with the amount of water that you have when we get to heaven. No more sea. And I'm sure John was grateful. Anybody remember where John is when he got this vision of... he's on a little bitty island in the middle of the Greek Isles now, and probably just about everywhere he looks, all he sees is water and seas. I bet John was probably great. No more seas. Yes, I am sick of this salt water. Sick of it, okay? And notice in verse 4, no more tears, no more tears, no more disappointments, no more trials, no more stress, no more lost love, no more broken hearts, no more broken homes. I like that. No more. No more death. The king of terrors, the last enemy, is gone. No, don't raise your hand, but it may come with aging. I look through the obituaries, and you can laugh at me, but many of you do as well, just to make sure you're not there. Okay? I don't look to see if I'm there, because I know I'm not yet. But I do look to see in this city, in this church that is very large, okay, if there's someone that I know. Now, I don't know if you do that or not, but I do that, okay? No obituaries, no funeral homes, no funerals. Now, when we get into next week of our, as it were, our work throughout eternity, there are some jobs we'll talk about next week that there will not be any need for. And one of those will be folks who run funeral parlors and who embalm human bodies. They won't be needed, okay? Those men and women of military and of law enforcement, they won't be needed because there's no crime. I mean, some of the occupations that provide security and protection will not be needed anymore when we get to heaven, okay? And then no more mourning. The idea there of mourning is more internal, deep-seated grieving. And in just a minute, and the next you'll say no more crying. That's more external, okay? Deep grief tends to begin with the external, lots and lots of tears. But it, in time, becomes more internalized, which I think is more intense in its grief. Okay, I know it's not true, but for all of us who've had deep, gut-wrenching losses that brought a lot of tears, you know, you get to the place sometimes you feel like, I've run out of water. I've run out of tears here, and then it's more internal. And I've referred to it as grief attacks. And no more. No more external, no more internal. And then I'll finish with this last one. And no more pain. I love that because I shared with you 30 minutes ago, I have no pain threshold. No more pain. No sickness, no disease, no hospitals, no doctors, no pharmacists, no Medicare, no Obamacare, and no insurance needs. All taken care of. All taken care of. Now, I'll pick up with some more because there are more things that we'll talk about next week that are still missing. But when you look at the city and all of the amenities of this great city that'll be the center of life for us in the future and the final heaven, and you think about these first few absences of things that are missing, let me ask you to discuss, before I have a word of prayer, and I'll have a word of prayer that you can discuss around your table. What's most appealing to you? I mean, really, what really, really resonates with you and really excites you the most? Okay, and we'll assume that the spiritual and being with God and being with Jesus and we'll assume that that's true. Kind of beyond that, what are some of the other things about life in heaven? In the future and final heaven that really, really excite you today. Okay? Let me have a word of prayer, and then I'll let you discuss and then head out a little bit. Father, thank you for our time together. What a fascinating. Thank you for the additional information about this New Jerusalem, center, capital, the holy city. That'll be the hub of everything in and out of the city. And being able to go at perhaps the speed of thought, but if not, just at least fast, and be able to travel and to visit and to see things that we've never seen in a perfect form on a new, resurrected, renovated, remodeled earth. We can't hardly imagine what that's going to be like, but it's for us. It's for us. Lord, I'm reminded of what your Spirit spoke to Paul. Eyes not seen, ears not heard, nor has it entered or even been conceived in the mind of man what you have prepared for us. Help us to appreciate that now. Help us to think more about heaven now. It'll make living here, not escape, but easier knowing that we have the certainty and the promise